Welcome back to the 24th of Remaking Hotline Miami in GameMaker Studio. And today we're gonna go and, well, change the control schemes. Before that we just had, let's say, our mouse. And as you can see, the mouse cursor is moving wherever it wants because it's a mouse. And then we use the keyboard for movement. And then, of course, well, the direction where the player is looking is where the mouse is. But of course, we can swap it to the, well, as you can see, the gamepad. And here, well, we have a little changed the system because now we are using the left thumb for movement, similar to the keyboard, and then we're using the right thumb of the gamepad for looking around. As you can see, the cursor is kind of locked in a radial well, position, depending where the player is watching. And this is what we're going to do, and it sounds easy. Yeah, just a few things which we need to understand with thresholds and how gamepad inputs work, etc, etc. And then of course we're going to incorporate it into the project. Alrighty, this is OneUpIndie. I am a developer, so if you like what you're seeing, hey, why not consider sharing, liking and subscribing. Alright, so let's jump into GameMaker. And before we absolutely start, a few things for explanation, because the controls of the gamepad and the keyboard are a little bit different, and therefore I just go a little bit more in depth what that actually means. So before that we just had our keyboard, so we use HSDW for movement, and then for example if the mouse was at this point, we calculated, hey, look at this direction, and then the player was automatically turning around depending where the mouse was. But now we have to forfeit this kind of control scheme, and now we need to look at where we are pointing with our well, right thumbstick, and we are using for control or for movement our left thumbstick. What we could do, of course, here you can actually change that or apply it or make it double there if you like. You can, for example, use this thumbstick, which has a value of 0 and 1. So it's a G-pad, pad L or U or D or R. So this is left, up, down and right. And they are the input. For example, if you're pressing it, this just means like, hey, I am 0, I am 1, and these are the only two values which you can actually input. What the hell has happened here? This is interesting. So this is what you can do. Interesting. Why has it changed? It doesn't really matter. Alrighty, so for now we actually want to use like originally these guys here. Why do we want to do this? Well, because they're a little bit more fluent, and second of all, they allow for a little bit more of in-between values. So you have a threshold here, which is going to be more important later on. So what do I mean by that? Well, if we are jumping into our project, so let's check it out how it looks like if it's finished. Alrighty, so we are in here, and as you can see, it already works. So we are using the left thumbstick. Hopefully you can hear that. This is the, what is it, Xbox controller. Of course, others will work as well. And then I'm pressing the left thumbstick, and we are spinning around and then looking in a specific direction. And then we are sticking to that, which will come later on because this is important also. Then of course we have the left shoulder button, the upper one to throw and pick up a weapon, and the right one for shooting. This is how it then works. Boom, and we can throw that stuff. So let's go into our other projects, which is our clone, and then we can apply the changes. The first thing which we can do is, let's go into our player and change a little bit how we are adapting to our mouse or to our controller. And for that we need, let's say, first of all, a little bit of control, and therefore we just have a few new variables which are gonna be important for later on. So inputs, and here we go, and for that we set a variable. I just call it control, you can call it whatever you like, and then this is kind of important later on to switch a few things. So first of all, well, how the view is being, well, calculated. So for now we have our control, which is our keyboard, and then we're checking later on the inputs, and then depending what kind of input we are having, boom, we're changing how this thing is being panned out. So for that we just say like, hey, we're just changing a few things. This dude stays, but here we just say like, hey, is our control scheme the keyboard? Then we are using the only thing, and then as you can see, nothing has changed for now. So we're just saying like, hey, from our player to our mouse, calculate the direction, of course, then we use our image angle to turn around our player. Nothing new for now, but let's do something. For example, we say like, hey, what if we have a different control scheme, which is our gamepad, here we go. And then we need to apply a few things. So first of all, we need to have our axis being checked, because let's go back in here. Here we don't have, let's say, single points, we have an axis. So basically here we have a horizontal axis, so GP axis left horizontal and GP axis left vertical. And here if you're pressing the middle button in here, then this is stick L, so this is a input thing. This is going to get used, for example, for focusing in Hotline Miami also. So here as you can see, this is a single point, so this can be 0 or 1 for the stick, but here values between -1 if you're pressing to the left maximum, and then +1 if we are pressing maximum to the right. And then of course you have in between values. So this is important to understand, and therefore we store in a variable, I don't know, we call it h-axis. These are the same variables. For example, if you just press F1 in your control scheme, and therefore I just use the same words not to confuse you, gamepad, and then we say axis and then value. And here we need two input parameters. Do we need? Yes, we do. Then it says like, hey, what kind of device we are using. Quick reminder. So basically here this is plug and play. So basically if you plug in your gamepad, then it just says like, hey, it gives it will be stored in a specific slot. So I guess you can plug in, I guess, up to 9. So the first slot is then 0, and then it goes to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and depending how many gamepads you are actually connecting your PC. So here, I guess we are done then with 0, because this is the first and the default one for our first thing. And this will be then, of course, automatically detected. So GameMaker Studio is just taking care of that. You don't need to understand how that works. It basically just checks like, hey, have you connected your gamepad? Hey, have you connected your gamepad? If yes, in slot 0 we have our first gamepad connected. And then we just say like, hey, what do we want to check? So once again, let's go back to our control scheme. So this is called GP axis L left horizontal, and therefore I just copy paste that in because this is a tongue breaker from my side. Boom. And then as you can see, we already made the first mistake because this is not correct. This we are using for movement, and this one we are using for looking around, and that's why it's called axis SRV, so vertical and horizontal. So let's go. Actually, I put in the correct one. So axis right and then horizontal, and then of course we can do the same thing for the vertical. And then these two things are being stored, which is great. And then what we could actually do is, and this is gonna get in the world of hurt from my side. As you can see, we can just say like, hey, point direction is not our X and Y. It's from, let's say, a 0 point, and then the axis and this. And for example, once we started, it does already work, which is great. So let's check it out. It almost works because our control scheme has not been changed. So let's make this very, very quickly. Later on, we will swap that dynamically. Come on. Alrighty, so let's check this out. And it already does work. And one little thing which is kind of curious. So let's say we are watching going up, and then it's always It's always swapping and going back to a position which isn't, for example, if you're looking, not a problem, but boom, we're letting go of the thumbstick. It goes back to a position which isn't good. So how can we remedy this little thingy here? Well, we just define a little thing which is called last direction. This is just basically a variable which is storing your last input. So for now, nothing has changed. So let's say we're just saying that if well, our values which we are grabbing here are not equal to 0, what do we do? So what do we do? Well, we're just saying like, hey, are we actually using our right thumbstick? Great, then set the direction to this specific point. But let's say, for example, if you wouldn't be touching it, this thing which would just return here 0, 0, and then we are snapping back to default position, which is the one you saw. That's not what we want. So basically, we're just saying like, cool, if we're having an input, then we are storing this specific direction into, well, our little variable, which I just called last direction. But what happens, for example, if those both things are 0? Because this is like not good. So basically we are not touching that thing at all. So it's 0. Well, we just say like, what is the case then? Well, we just say like, okay, we have a stored variable which are called last direction, and we set our direction to it because we have no input. So we're just taking the last one saved because we don't want to override our direction all the time, even though, for example, we are not touching our controller. Yeah, this is the thing. So this is the issue with the threshold. So I thought like, did I make a mistake? No, I did not. This is an issue with the threshold, but for now, let's keep it that way. And I'm gonna explain what I mean by that. So let's go and see like, okay, sweet, this stuff is already working. So we are, depending on what kind of input we are having, so what kind of control scheme, boom, we're just saying like, hey, we are, well, turning around our player, and then we use this image angle to, well, achieve that. And now we are just saying like, okay, so what is the next step to actually make this a little bit more adaptable? So check it out. Am I still yes, I'm still recording. 12 minutes in. This will be a long video. So the first thing which I say like, to make this a little bit more nicer to look at, we just take our controls and then we just kill them, and then we import them into a needle script so it looks a little bit nicer. So let's go for script. And then call it input. Here, one thing, we won't be doing button swapping, we just have one. So here there will be no changing of that. We are static in that way. If you want to do this, but I didn't want to confuse you, so we would need to have more variables, but let's change that here. So we have our little script. Of course, we need to input it. Well, so nothing changes. So basically we just swapped it. And then of course, if you haven't used GameMaker Studio for quite some time, scripts have changed. So basically we need to wrap them like this in there. So this is the end of the script. Before that it was just external code. Now it is external code, but input in this specific thing, and then it says function, and then here it ends and here it starts, and this is just basically it. So hopefully a quick reminder on that thing. For now nothing has changed, but we want to input our, well, things. So first of all we need to distinguish, hey, how are we actually using our keyboard? So how can we do this? Well, we can just say like, hey, have we pressed left or right or up and down, or maybe the other keys. Here I'm just gonna be a little bit lazy and copy paste that. And boom, we're just saying like, okay, first we are checking for the inputs, and then if one of them is 1, then we're saying, yeah, we're definitely using the keyboard. Cool. But of course we can use the same method, because this keyboard should be then as a default control method. But let's say we plugged in a controller, our gamepad, and we want to use it. So we can use this thing same-ish, but in it, well, let's say we just override the things which we are having here. So what we can do, we just say like, hey, are we actually using a gamepad? So are we overriding a few things? So first of all, we can use the same stuff which we did before. So we're just checking the axis, but now it's the left thumb. So let's go back into the thing. Now we're using this dude here. The hell just happened here? Okay, never mind me. Don't want to check that out. So basically we're just checking like our H axis and our V axis, but now for the left thumb. And then we're just checking like, have we actually pressed one of those things? Then we just say like, okay, so if this one is, let's say, a 1, or for example this one is 1, so for example we are pressing it completely, so not just, if you just press it just a little bit, it won't be reacting, but let's say for example we just give it a nice little press to the left or to the right or whatever, and then one of those guys is then set to the maximum value of 1, boom, we are just using the gamepad. Why do I do this? Well, because maybe you were just touching your gamepad by accident and then you don't want it, and therefore but of course if you say like or want it to be a very, let's say, precise, then of course you go with smaller values if you like. So for example, if the V-axis is bigger or smaller or whatever, but this is, I guess, a cleaner, easier way to switch. So now we already swapped from our controls, which are, well, default keyboard. So close that, go back to our thingy here, and we can actually check it out. And for now, nothing has really changed. Why is that? Well, because we haven't applied the movement to it, but we are now in our control scheme, which is the gamepad. So for example here, as you can see, normally it starts with keyboard, but as you can see, I'm using now my thumbstick. Hopefully you can hear it, and then boom, we can turn around, and this is only achieved if we are being, well, in the control scheme of our gamepad. So let's take that to the rest and open it up. So F1, if you don't know how to do this, F1, for example, if you don't know what these things mean, F1 of them, and then you get to the manual, which is pretty practical. So now we need to apply these axis values of our left thumbstick. And how can we do this? Well, kind of easy, because we already have those variables here for the horizontal speed. And the vertical here, we just had right minus left and left or up, down minus up. But here we can just use these guys because they already are values. And the practical thing about this thing here is, come on, if we start it, the practical thing is that for example, we can run faster because the values are not just 1 or 0, they are in between. And so therefore we can just go slowly, and therefore. But now you're seeing, for example, now I'm not touching my gamepad, but this dude is twitching like hell. So why is that happening? Because bad calibration of my gamepad or whatever, but there are some dead zones you can define, for example, where you have minimal input and you don't want this minimal input. This is called then a threshold. So how can we fix this? Very easy actually. So let's go into our create events and say like, there is a my gamepad is twitching, I don't want this. Therefore we just say gamepad set, and then axis, and then dead zone, and then you're saying, hey, which device? 0, and then I went for 0.3, and of course you can go for more or less, but then this should be then a standard for your game. And now you will see that the twitching has stopped. So we are having no minimal input errors, which we don't want. So now we can actually walk around, which is great, and then we can look, which is great also. So the last thing which we can want to do is, well, use our kind of new control method inputs for throwing and picking up. And this is a very quick fix from my side. Of course, there are more elegant ways, but I guess I don't want to completely bore you. So there are a few areas on which, for example, we're just using, hey, for example, if you're grabbing the weapon or we are throwing, then we use the right mouse button. So how can we remedy that? Well, for example, if we are grabbing a weapon, then we are not, let's say, constantly pressing a thing, we're just releasing that thing. But let's say the mouse button is like this, and therefore we just say like, let's create a button for, what is that? Throw weapon. And then we just store that thing in here. So our mouse. Then we can just, oops, and get rid of that. And then, for example, now nothing would have changed. Let's say or, and now we can just say like, hey, or have we pressed our check released? Here we go. Have we released our shoulder button? Right? What was it? Throwing? No, throwing was left. So here we go. Boom. And then, for example, we can apply that same thing for not just throwing, but for firing. And here we just say like, hey, fire weapon. Then of course we are pressing the left mouse button, but as you can see, firing is not released, it is a constant press. So therefore we just go here and go here, then apply the correct button and just replace that duty in here. And did I change anything? No. And now we are almost finished because we need to apply the same thing for throwing. Where are you? We need to apply it in our pickup event, in our pickup object, which is this dude here. And he had a similar, well, collision event. And there, as you can see, right mouse button, boom. And then what are we doing here? We are just picking it up. So pick up weapon, and we just replace the whole thing. And then of course this is on release. And now for the left, yes, now we can actually check it out. Left shoulder button, boom, we picked it up. And then we are shooting. And of course, if you say like, oh, gamepad controller has died off, let's use this control scheme, and then boom, we can swap back to the normal one. And then, for example, we can throw that one. Come on. One little change, which I completely forgot. Let's say we are overriding here with our axis, and this is only, of course, valid if our controls are gamepad. So here we just say a little extra thing. I completely forgot it. So because I was now cutting out the movement from the keyboard, if you want to, for example, dynamically swap back. So here we go. And then this works correctly. So let's check it out. Sorry, my bad. I completely forgot that point. Come on, faster. As you can see, we can move, can shoot. And then, for example, we select, oh, the gamepad, the battery is down or whatever. We don't want to use it. And then, boom, we are swapping back to our control scheme of the keyboard. Alrighty, that was definitely it. Have a good one. One up in.